If you have your Bibles, you can turn to the book of Exodus, chapter 1. We did the overview sermon last week, and we're just getting started with Exodus chapter 1. If you don't have a Bible, there's a pew Bible in front of you, and the first book of the Bible is Genesis, and the second book of the Bible is Exodus. And so just find that page that says Exodus and that big number 1 right there, and the small numbers are verse numbers, and it's verse 8 that we'll start with through 22 for sure. I had a conversation almost 2 weeks ago now, and I think I shared it a little bit last week, but it concluded, we were talking about prayer and what prayer meant and how it worked, and the frustration that prayers don't always get answered like we want them to, or God's not always moving in ways that we can see or feel that we want him to. And the question that got posed in our conversation was, when we're praying that way and we don't sense the Lord doing the things that we think he ought to be doing or wish he would be doing, the question to ask is, God, how good are you? Or another way to phrase it is, do you believe that God is as good as he says he is? It's harder to do that in times of suffering, in times of persecution. But it is the right question to ask. In every moment of our life, do we believe that God is as good as he says he is? The book of Exodus was written in the second half of Moses' life, somewhere between the age of 80 and 120. We don't know exactly when it came to be, but that's what we believe. But if you can put yourself this morning on the banks of the Jordan River, at least in a group of people 1 million strong, probably more, with an army of 500,000 fighting men or better. And if you can imagine yourself that 10 men told you that the people, right, 10 spies went out and they saw the promised land that the Lord had promised you, and they came back saying the people are too many and they're too big for us to fight. There's no way we can overtake it. And for those men, because of those men's fear, it cost them 40 years of wandering and a lost generation of people never seeing the promised land. But there were 2 men who believed that God is so good that what he promised he would give them, he would give them. Joshua and Caleb. And when he is confronted, right? When he is asked, when Moses is asked, or Joshua is asked, or confronted with the idea or the fear that they may not be successful, perhaps one of these men, Moses, Joshua, Caleb, replied that they could go the way of fear like their father and their grandfather who's no longer with them, or they could go the way of promise, the way of God, and they would flourish. We can experience the fatality that comes from fear, or we can experience the flourishing that comes from promise. That's the options. Those are the ultimate options. Fatality, death, that comes through fear, or we can experience the flourishing that comes through the God of promise. Follow along as I read Exodus chapter 1, verses 8 through 22. Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with these people, lest they multiply. And if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land. Therefore, they, the Egyptians, set taskmasters over them, the Israelites, to afflict them with heavy burdens. And they built for Pharaoh store cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more the people of Israel were oppressed, the more they multiplied and the more they spread abroad. And the Egyptians were in dread of the people of Israel. So they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves. And they made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick and in all kinds of work in the field. In all their work, they ruthlessly made them work as slaves. Then the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah. Pharaoh said, when you serve as midwife to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall kill him. But if it is a daughter, she shall live. But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the male children live. So the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, why have you done this, and let the male children live? The midwives said to Pharaoh, well, because the Hebrew women, they're not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them. So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. And then Pharaoh commanded all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrews you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. This is the word of the Lord. There is the fatality that comes from fear, and there is the flourishing that comes from promise. These are our two options. If you have a fatality that comes from fear, it sort of goes down like this. The first thing you're going to do, the fearfulness that's going to come to you, is going to come from looking at the world around you. Right? If you look at verse 8, there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he says, behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Pharaoh lives in a fatality that comes from fear. There's too many people. Now, this is interesting because Pharaoh is believed to be, is understood to be the manifestation of the sun god. Like he's worshiped as a deity. He is seen not only as a king, but as a god, whether that sun god is Ra or that sun god is Aten. We're not quite for sure, but they think he's a sun god. Manifestation of that, the incarnation of it. People worship him this way, and the people look for his provision to keep them sustained. They look for him for power to keep them safe. That's his job. And yet he's looking around and he's fearful. In fact, he's so much this deity. There's the Holman Bible Dictionary talks about him like this. It says, the ancient Pharaoh was an absolute monarch, supreme commander of the armies, chief justice of the royal court, and high priest of all religion. His absolute power may be seen in that justice was defined as what he loves and wrongdoing as what Pharaoh hates. An example of his divine power was that daily conducted the rite of the house of mourning. Listen carefully. An early morning ritual in which he broke the seal to the statue of the sun god, waking the sun god up with prayer. This act brought the sun up and started every day for the people. Pharaoh was the guy who made the sun rise. It's awfully interesting that he is the incarnation of the sun god and raises the sun every morning, yet he looks out amongst the people and he is scared. Puny God. But if you look around at the world, right? If any of us look around at the world and look at all that's going on in the world, we too can find ourselves fearful, regardless of who we think we are, regardless of what we're able to do. But because we are fearful, then our response outside of God, then our response then is to try to control anything and everything we can do about what we are fearful of. Again, look at all that this God feared. In verse 9, we just read it. They are too many, and they are too mighty for us. In verse 10, he's going to deal shrewdly with the people. The God of the Son is going to deal shrewdly with people. Interesting. Seems like he could just command them. And he's scared that they're going to join his enemies, and they'll be too much for him. Interesting. The Son God fears earthly enemies. And so in light of this, he's going to control this by, in verse 11, by afflicting people and oppressing people. And ironically, as the leader goes, so goes the people, because as he's doing all this stuff, the Israelites are growing stronger, and the Egyptians are in dread. Their sun god leader fears the people, and now his people fear the people. So he goes to the midwives, the Hebrew midwives, and he's going to control it. Hey, just kill the sons. We'll kill the sons. They can't produce anymore, and we'll just take in their wives. We'll make them part of us. We'll have more Egyptians, and we're good to go. And when they don't obey, he then calls them back and says, what are you doing? Still trying to control. Like, I cannot believe that you would disobey my command. What are you doing? And because they are defiant of the king, he then goes to all of his people to control his fears, to make things right. He goes to all of us, like, forget the midwives. Anybody who's an Egyptian, anybody who's under my reign, if you see a Hebrew boy born, just throw him in the Nile. We'll just kill them all one way or the other. Pharaoh is acting in fear. And when we look at the world around us and are overwhelmed, our instinct is to try to control it, right? Pharaoh's instinct is to control it. And when you realize you cannot control it, but you don't have any place else to turn, you're just going to try to double down on your control. You're going to try and double down on trying to overcome this fear and make it right. And we see it in the rest of the book. Because Moses and Aaron are going to come to him and say, hey, you got to let this people go. And Pharaoh's going to say, not a chance. And then Pharaoh's going to come, and then God's going to come with 10 plagues. Each time Pharaoh being asked, hey, submit so this thing doesn't happen. Repent, turn, let the people go, follow Yahweh God. And he's going to say, not a chance. He's even going to double down again at the Red Sea after he actually lets them go, after the killing of the firstborn and the Passover and the angel of death. And then he says, get out of here, go worship. He goes, and he realizes, he's like, oh, I've let him go. Oh, I'm not in control. Oh, the economic flourishing of my kingdom will no longer be there because I don't have slaves to do the work. Oh, it's all going to cower. Oh, army, mount up, go to them, bring them back. Pharaoh's continually living in his fear, and it results in the death of his army. And it will ultimately result in the death of his firstborn. And ultimately, it will result in his own death. It comes from fear. What do we do with this? Church, we're going to have to conclude and realize that you are not in control. Now, here's some good news this morning. I don't think there's anybody in here that I know of that thinks they are an incarnation of a deity. And I'm really proud of y'all for that. I'm very excited about that. It saves me a lot of pastoral problems. The elders are all in tune with that. We're like, yes. When we check boxes off, does any of our membership think they are a deity? Nope. Oh, yes. Good news, right? But the bad news is that we all absolutely fear something. Whether it's snakes, or the fear of tomorrow, or the fear of a relationship, or the fear of death. We fear what we cannot control. And the more bad news is that we respond to that fear by trying to control it. We either avoid the fear, or we try to submit the fear to our will, or we try to manipulate it and manage it so that we'll be okay. But there's more bad news. Ultimately, you're not going to win. You will have victories because you can avoid snakes. It's not that hard. Just see them in the plexiglass, be like, good job, snake, stay there. You're all right. You don't have to go for a walk in the woods ever if you don't want to. Never get bit. So you can dodge some of them. You certainly can. But you can't dodge them all. You can't make it all right. You certainly aren't going to avoid death, nor manipulate it, nor control it. And what we'll realize, the bad news, the worst kind of news, is that if you won't surrender to the one who's over your fears, to the one true living God, eventually then your fears will thwart you. In fact, your worst fears will come to fruition. In fact, things you don't actually fear because your mind can't comprehend them, namely hell. It'll be a reality for you. It'd be a reality for me if I wouldn't surrender to the King of Kings and Lord of Lords who's overcome death. The good news, some good news, not the ultimate good news, but some good news is found in an anonymous quote. Fear gives intelligence to fools. If I'm a fool, I'm afraid of fire. Probably won't touch the fire, will I? I start making decisions that might give me some help. But the better news is there's a better kind of fear, right? There's a fear that gives wisdom for all of life, including a right kind of fear that gives you wisdom for all your other fears. It can be found in Proverbs chapter 9, verse 10. And it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And again, in Proverbs 19, verse 23, it says, the fear of the Lord actually leads to life, and whoever has it rests satisfied. He will not be visited by harm. There's only one kind of fear that you should truly have. The deepest kind of fear, the realest kind of fear, is the fear of God himself. You don't have to fear Pharaoh. Pharaoh's got all the fears himself. He's no God. You don't have to fear a snake. You can crush a snake if you get the right tools. Just know he's coming. You don't have to fear tomorrow because tomorrow's not even promised to you. How about that one? You don't have to fear relationships because if those relationships are built on the foundation of Jesus Christ, then you are able to come into to forgiveness, to reconciliation. You're able to come into agreement. You're able to come together. You don't have to fear death. You don't have to fear death. Because death is just a doorway, right, into everlasting life. We sing it that way. Death is just getting us from one side to the other. And not that you have to wish to die today. Please don't do that. The Lord loves you, needs you, wants to use you in this lifetime for as long as he gives you breath. But when that day comes, there's no need to fear. Because the Lord, the God of promise, will make you flourish in this life and the next. Look at the flourishing of God's promise. Look at these midwives who look at the Creator God with eyes of faith. This is how you overcome your fear. You have eyes of faith. I wanted so bad this morning, church, so bad to title this sermon, Two Bad Mothers. I wanted so bad. But I think it's good, funny for right now, but it won't be there in perpetuity. That's good, right? That's wisdom. That's the fear of the Lord. It's coming to fruition right there. These ladies are, beautiful pictures of ladies with faith. These midwives are probably either representatives or superintendents over the whole profession of the midwives, right? It's not very sensible to think of it in terms of, hey, these two midwives are midwifing for all, 750,000 ladies who are having babies in the Hebrew nation. That's probably not real. So it's probably like, hey, this is to be disseminated out to all the midwives for all of Israel. There can be a little bit of debate about their nationality as how the text, whether it's midwife to the Hebrews or midwife of the Hebrews, but it seems like the devotion they have to God and that the names they have, which are Hebrew names, makes them Jewish ladies. Shifra means beautiful, and Pua means splendor or the splendid one. And we know that while man looks like the outer appearance, God sees beauty from the inside out. He looks at the heart. So it makes good sense these ladies are Hebrew ladies. And the question then comes, how is it that two slave women can look at the face of a proclaimed deity, the most powerful man in their universe, who says, you go and kill all the boys, and they just look at him and say, nah, not doing it. Maybe they're able to because since they were midwives, they knew that this God at one time was simply born like all the other boys were, and they knew that he was no God at all. Maybe their logic just let them reason out that way. Or perhaps though they had doubted they would ever be saved, someone had told a story about God's faithfulness, and it sort of gave them a boldness and a hope to stand against it. Or perhaps because they are Hebrew ladies, perhaps they remember the story of their forefather Abraham. And perhaps they remember the promise of the covenant, the promise God made to Abraham in Genesis 15, where Moses wrote down, as the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell on Abram, later to be called Abraham. And behold, a dreadful and great darkness fell upon him, the fear of the Lord, yeah? And then the Lord said to Abraham, know this for certain, that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and will be servants there, and they will be afflicted for 400 years. But I will bring judgment on the nation that they serve, and afterward they shall come out with great possessions. Maybe they remembered the stories of old and said, no, I know right where I am in the divine economy. And this is no God at all. And the God that I serve will deliver us. And I don't know if he's going to deliver us today or tomorrow. I don't know if I'll see it physically in this life or not, but I know that I'm not bowing down to that guy. There's no way. They believed. They had eyes of faith to hear the promise and say, I'm not sure about my circumstances. I don't like being a slave. They might not even like being a midwife for all I know, but for sure, they're like, I'm going to follow the God of promise. I'm going to follow Yahweh God. And in that belief, they're then believing that everything he's asking of them is good. Right? Everything the Lord asks of them is a good thing. Look at verse 17. But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but they let the male children live. Look at verse 19. The midwife said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwives can get to them. Look, their faith, their belief in God led them to action. That's true for us too. Right faith leads to right action. And they know that God's aim is always to preserve life, never to take it. That's his desire. So they let the babies live. And then that led to Pharaoh confronting them, as we read in the story. So either you read this text and you see that you believe that they lied to defy evil and infanticide, or they were speaking of their particular experience that when they went to deliver babies, they came out quickly, or they knew that God miraculously made roughly 500,000 mothers of Hebrew children give vigorous birth to their sons. So in fact, all the midwives in all the kingdom were always late to all the babies because all the babies were being delivered fast. There's your three options. Either they lied, personal experience, or miraculous, vigorous birth for 500,000 ladies. Regardless of how you land, they're not afraid of death. They're not afraid of the king. They're not afraid of a false deity, a puny God. Because they knew that the God of all gods, the only true God, would save them. I wonder if Esther knew their names. I wonder if Esther, who had to go before the king, with her attitude, if I die, I die. I wonder if she knew their names. Shiphrah, Puah. Well, if they're going to stand up to Pharaoh, I'll go into the king's court. I wonder if Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego knew their names. We will not bow down, for our God can save us. And even if he doesn't save us in this moment, we won't bow down to you because we know who the God of life is. I wonder if Daniel knew their names. These midwives believed that whatever happens in this life, God is good and he will fulfill his promises. That was the foundation on which they lived their life, and they did not waver. And when this took place, right, whatever happens is good, right? Whatever God does, it's good, and he will fulfill his promises. And the text bears it out. So God dealt well with the midwives. And the people multiplied and grew very strong. In fact, the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied. Where the puny God is doubling down against his fears to defy the one true God so that he can control everything, the one true God is doubling down in the creative mandate given to Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply and subdue the earth. He's fulfilling his promise to his people, even in the midst of 400 years of slavery. Verse 21 tells us, right, that these midwives feared God. And because the midwives fear God, he gave them families. This is what the Lord promised. What do you do with this? What should we make of this? Here we go. Church, there is a creator God who made you, who loved you, who died for you, who rose again for you. His name is Jesus, and there is none his equal. Psalm 19 teaches us that it is the fool who says there is no God. And Jesus' name applies the same for those who will not follow him. We are not saying that if you don't follow Christ, that you act foolishly on a day-to-day basis about your life or your family or finances. But against the everlasting God of the universe, it is absolute foolishness and folly not to believe in the one who loves you so much, who shed his blood for you. For the worst things about me and you is what he died for, that you might be with him forever. And he goes to no ends. There's no length too great. He doesn't go to show us that. Believe in him. Trust him. Because everything God asks is good. Objectively, And everything that God asks is for our good. And everything that he asks that is for our good results in his glory. That's how it works. That's what the whole books of Exodus is going to show us. Over these next weeks and months and years, you're going to see it over and over again that there are terrible things that happen, sinful things that happen, but it is for his glory and it is for our good. Church, not everything God asks of us do we prefer. You may not like your job. You may not be enjoying your marriage currently and wish you had a way out. You may not like this church very much, but you still come faithfully, trying to figure out what is going on. It's fine. You may not like the sickness that you are currently having to deal with. I understand. The Lord may be calling you to move someplace, somewhere, somehow. He may be asking a major shift of you, and you don't like it. You do not like it. But everything God asks us to go through is for our good and his glory. Pastor Jay, you're saying right now, you say, Pastor Jay, please don't be silly. You don't know my life. You don't know how bad it is. You don't know how difficult it is. And Pastor Jay, just read the own text. 400 years of oppression and slavery is not good. Now, I would agree. 400 years of slavery is not good. I don't think that's what I'm arguing. What I'm saying is that if he asks you to go through it, it is the truest sort of good. It is the ultimate good. And good will come from it. And God will be glorified. Do you want God's glory in your life forevermore? See, because you have to ask yourself, what is it that you really, truly want? And do you want that glory more than anything else, more than any earthly treasure? Do you want to be a part of a glory that is going to cover the earth like waters cover the sea? I don't think the midwives knew they were going to get families. I don't think the midwives knew that they wouldn't be killed on the spot for disobeying that puny little god, Pharaoh. I think the only thing they had to hang their hat on, the only thing they could put their confidence in, was a God of promise that said, I will be your God and you will be my people, and I will bring you to the right place at the right time. And they were just obedient because they wanted that. I know it might feel like God is not fulfilling his promises to you, but you are going to have to let your faith reign over your feelings and let your faith shape your feelings so that you can walk obedient unto the Lord, receiving his grace, his forgiving grace of all your sins, so that you can know his glory, because God will fulfill his promise. And his promise is everlasting life. Look, just as Pharaoh tried to kill all the infant boys to stop the growth of the Hebrews, so King Herod in the New Testament declared infanticide during the days of Jesus, so that the promised Messiah could not come. Oh, another ruler who's living in fear of his own power and his own throne, of losing that which he loves the most, which he's going to lose anyways. And yet he's unsuccessful because Jesus is saved. Just as God would promise David and Solomon an eternal bloodline for an everlasting family, so he gave the midwives temporary families while keeping them in their eternal family. Just as Shiphrah and Puah would stand before the king and live, so Christ stood before governors and leaders and died so that he could rise again to fulfill all the scriptures had talked about. That there would be a Messiah to come to deliver people from their sins, from the greatest kind of oppression you've ever had in your life. Whether you experience it that way or not, whether you believe it or not, the Bible is telling us that our sinfulness, our own sinful hearts, are our greatest oppressor. They are the cause that will lead us to death, our own sin. And yet Jesus says, I will deliver you. Is God as good as he says he is? The answer is yes. The answer is absolutely yes. Follow Jesus.